Right, welcome to week 12, Mobile App Portfolio 1. I can't believe I'm saying that already. I feel like the semester has just flown by and we're already week 12. So we've got 2 more weeks before the end of the term. And then you guys have semester 2 with me again, which will be really cool because then we'll even push what we've done this semester even further. So I want you guys to remember way back at the very beginning in week 1 or 2 when I started introducing something to you guys called the Sdlc. Does anyone remember what that stands for? This is
Software
your
development,
Software
cycle.
development life cycle. Yeah.
Yes, okay, perfect. I was going to say this is your moment to prove to me that my teaching works and it's stuck with you. System development lifecycle. You guys got it. And do you guys remember what the 5 phases of the system development lifecycle were? We've kind of been going through the three first ones this whole semester. If you can't give me all 5, give me the 3 that we've kind of touched on so far this semester.
Planning, designing, and developing.
You got it. Perfect. Yeah. So we had the ideation phase where you come up with that idea, and we were in Miro, and everyone had their own board of ideas, and then we started to design that idea once we picked it in groups, and you guys, made wireframes. We learned about UDL. We made, mock-ups and UML use case diagrams and all of that good stuff, activity diagrams. So then that was the design phase. And then we are currently and still in the development phase, right? You guys are in sprint 3, you're in the middle, in the thick of it. And I'm going to introduce actually the 4th phase, which technically, the 3rd and the 4th phase, you should be kind of going between them, which is what we're going to do, which is why I'm introducing it now, because you'll continue to develop in semester 2 next semester, but you'll also want to be testing your app as you go. So testing is the 4th phase, and then the last phase, obviously, deployment, right? And testing can kind of be mixed with another phase called stabilization, and that can also be done after your app's deployed on the App Store. So once your app is out there, you might have users that are using it and they report bugs to you. You might have beta testers, and then you have to fix those bugs and update your app and give it a patch. And then, version 2.0 comes out, and now you've stabilized your app and it's more stable. So we're going to talk about testing today. We're going to just touch on the basics of it, and then I'm going to give you guys your last project for this app for this semester, which will be 20% of your mark because we need to do one more major project, and it will have to do with testing. So it's a short slideshow. It's 11 slides. So let's just, we'll get right into it here. So when you test, depending on the platform you're on, for Android specifically, I have this set up because I used to, really focus on Android with this. I need to still include some iPhone stuff, but there's little caveats in what you need to do. So you might already know this with Android. Down here, you have to tap on the version of your Android system in the settings. If you scroll all the way to the bottom and you go About Phone, you tap on the version of your phone 10 times, and then it'll actually say you're now a developer in a little toast message right there. And what that does is if you go back to your settings above the About Phone section, there'll now be something called Developer Options. And inside of developer options, you can actually enable something called USB debugging. There's a ton of other options in here if you want to show the spacing and the margins of your apps and all of that stuff. You can turn those on in the developer options. So kind of a cool little feature for Android. I don't know exactly, on iPhone if it's the exact same way. I don't develop on iPhone, so I'm not the best person to ask for that. But debugging and testing on Android, you turn this on, and then there's one line of code you have to add in your manifest.xml file, right? And it's in the application tag, and it's just a flag that says debuggable equals true. So that will allow you to actually debug and test your app, right? If you set this to true. You can set it to false as well when you're not testing, and then you don't have to debug it. What this does is it allows the USB debugger to be allowed to debug the app while you're running it through the USB cables and drivers from your computer to your phone, right? So I can plug my phone in, physical device into the computer and actually test it on my phone. You have to make sure all your drivers are up to date and installed, and then you just run the project in debug mode instead of just normal mode. So it's that little icon with a bug on it. And I'm assuming it's a very similar process in Swift. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is testing. What's the testing phase for? Why do we do it, right? So testing, obviously, you guys probably know this, is to identify errors or fix bugs, right? We identify those issues and we find out what is going on with our app, what potential pitfalls are going on that we need to look at, right? So you can use scripts, you can use tools to automate your testing, and we're going to look at that more in semester 2. Right now that we're in the early stages, your apps might change a lot between now and week 12 of semester 2. So if we automated our testing and then we changed the entire structure of our app, you're going to waste a lot of time automating your testing. So we'll just stick to manual testing for now, because you might change the way your screen acts, you might change some of the labels and the inputs, and if you automate that stuff and it's not there anymore, then the automation testing won't work. So right now we'll just do manual, and that's the two types of application testing that there is. So we can see here on this screen, there's manual testing, which is what we're going to be doing, where you literally just go in, you click, you know what you're looking for, you know what the normal use case is, and you know what the the fail state or the success state of that test should be. And there's two phases that we carry out our testing in. There's front end or user interface testing. So you're testing your design, you're testing, if it acts similarly, if you rotate into portrait versus landscape mode. And then there's back-end testing. So you guys probably don't have back-end set up. I know some of you guys set up your Firebase and stuff, but you might not have any dynamic data in there yet. But just verifying the database behavior is the back-end testing. That's the other half of it. All right, and then there's the automated testing, which we'll talk more about semester 2, which will be using automated test scenarios where you can pre-program what you want the computer to test for, and then as you go through your app, you just have to click, run this test, and it will do it for you. And then that way you don't have to take the app out, run it, log in, type your username, password, go to this certain screen you're testing, and then type in all the input values and see if the test works. The computer just takes care of it for you, right? And it does the test scenario from the end user perspective to evaluate, usability, functionality, the performance, etc. Okay. So in terms of the different types of categories for testing, we're specifically going to be focusing on this bottom one, which is mobile application testing. Okay, so there's different things you test for depending on what you're building. If you're building a web app, for example, you'd want to test it on different browsers. You'd want to test it, for load and stress testing and a bunch of other stuff that wouldn't maybe make sense for mobile app testing. Desktop apps also, different. You're not worried about browsers. So for mobile app testing, we want to test our UI. We want to test our rules. So, if the username and password match, it logs in. If username and password doesn't match, it gives an error or it gives feedback to the user. Regression, functional testing, and security testing. We want to make sure our app's secure. We want to make sure our functions work. All of that good stuff. And I've got a sheet that I'm going to show you guys that shows specific tests that we can look into. Okay, so why do we test? So we know it's to find the errors and the bugs. So what are some of the other benefits? Well, it helps your release be bug-free. So you can be confident, when we deploy this app eventually to the app stores, that it will be bug-free and it's a robust piece of software in the real world. And it enables your team to identify those bugs early on, right? So we're, I would say, still in the early stage of development. We're sprint 3 right now, so we're getting into the middle of it almost. And we want to be able to identify any bugs that you have early on, right? So that it doesn't grow or get more complex as your app grows and becomes more complex, right? We want to hit these bugs right away. So the other benefit is agile development, right? That's what we've been talking about with a scrum leader and sprints and 2-week sprints with demos and all of that stuff, right? That's the trend right now in the real world among organizations, and it's imperative that your team can automate the test cycles. So as we go, into next semester with our 2-week sprints, you want to be able to have testing cycles that are automated that can just run those tests automatically on a 2-week basis and just double check, okay, the login still works and it still gives feedback if it's a wrong login, and my functionality for viewing poker history or statistics, all the math makes sense and it's working, and my test scenarios run every 2 weeks. And as you develop more functionality into your app, you want to make sure that the stuff that you're coding doesn't change or break as you go. So you just keep running those tests. And what this does is it helps you introduce new features to your app a lot faster, and you can gain an edge over any competition you have in the market, right? Because you're able to keep your app up to date, you're able to keep it working and bug free, and just keep adding new features, knowing that your app's going to be a complete piece of software every single 2-week development period or sprint. Okay, so how do we do it? So we know why, we know what we're doing it for. What tools do you use? Well, for automated testing, there's frameworks, and a really popular one that you can look into is called Appium. It's a really highly preferred app automation framework. We won't be covering it this semester, but next semester, in semester 2, we'll be looking into that in the testing community. For web app testing, Selenium is a really popular one, and for cross-browser compatibility, there's the Selenium WebDriver. So if you guys were building, React apps that were going to be, hybrid versions, you could test your app on the browser as well. If you're just doing native mobile application testing, then a couple other options would be Sakuli, Test Complete, PhoneMonkey, or Rebodium. But like I said, these are for automated testing, so we won't be covering these just yet. So with manual testing, how do you test it if you're doing it yourself? What do we look for? Well, each app's unique, and as the developers, you guys actually know what you're looking for. You know how it's supposed to work and how it should behave and how it shouldn't behave. So because each app's unique, you have to be the one to test it, at least starting off. And doing this testing ensures that it's going to meet the end user requirements, right? So a couple of steps here. Step 1, you want to create a test plan. So just like we created a plan and you spent a couple of weeks doing the planning for your app in the team collaboration board in Miro, you want to create some sort of document or list of things that you are requiring your app to have to be considered successful, right? So a list of functionality, a list of expected responses or application states that you want to be working in order for it to be considered successful. Number 2 is developing those manual test case scenarios, right? So if I have my battery on low power mode or my phone's on do not disturb, and I click this certain button to share something from my app, from my custom workout or something like that, does it still work? If I'm in portrait mode versus landscape mode and I try to scroll down and read this blog post, can I still view it? Is it still accessible to me? Little things like that. If I'm in my app and I get an incoming phone call from someone, does my app freeze and lock up if there's an interruption? Or does it perform normally and allow me to take the call, and when I hang up the call and I go back, my app's still running perfectly fine, right? You want to be able to test these odd use cases and these odd tests to make sure that in the real world, when people do download your app and that stuff does happen, with such a wide user base, things happen all the time that are weird. Maybe your phone dies and then they boot it back up. Is the app going to perform strangely because it crashed or because the phone died and shut down? Like, you want to be able to be prepared for every sort of scenario from an end user perspective. Number 3 would be automating those test scenarios using scripts, right? So next semester, don't worry about that. That's just step 3, is just automating it so that you don't have to do that every single time. And then step 4 is performing and actually running the tests and making sure that it all fits your requirements, right? Okay, so a couple example test cases that you can include or be thinking about. We can read up here things to do with network infrastructure, target devices, using an iPhone or an Android, a Samsung. You know, what if it's a really old iPhone? What if it's the newest iPhone, an iPad? Like what impact does that have when you switch your device? Manual and automated testing, and what if you go in airplane mode or something like that? So a couple things to keep in mind. You want your installation working. You want your authorization working. You want your Wi-Fi, your data cable, your Bluetooth, all of that stuff to continue to work while your app's running. You want uninstallation to be successful. So if you try to uninstall the app, does it work? Um, does it show your logo, your splash screen? If you're low on memory, or if your phone is almost full on storage, and you try to install the app, is there any funky behavior? Visual feedback. Can you exit the application? Can you start or restart it smoothly? There's a bunch of extra reading here in the end of this PowerPoint that you guys can look at additional optional reading for other resources, as well as here on developer.android.com/studio/test, and another resource here at softwaretestinghelp.com. So if you guys want to read those, totally optional, but great resources that I have used in the past and I recommend. And I just want to show you, I'll pause this recording because that's the end of this PowerPoint. And then we'll get into the specifications for project 2. Well, let me end the recording. It's been funky all day. There we go. And stop.